How do they, guys, and welcome back to Edgar TV, where today we're going to take a look at some darts equipment accessories. This one. This is a flight puncher. If you're not familiar with what a flight punch is, it's sort of a little hole puncher that you put on your flights that aids the rings that we put in terms of the grip. Now, the most traditional use for these is to stop the sort of deflections which pulls the flight out of the end of the dart. Now, what these do traditionally, they sit between the flight and the stem. If we take a normal traditional stem and we take a ring grip, this is how they tend to have been used before, where the sort of ring sits on the end of the stem, which just pushes the prongs together to get a tighter fit for the flight to stop it just popping off on the end. The other thing that this can do is it can sort of push the prongs together to aid the dart not going in the back, so the point not going into the back of the actual stem, causing Robin Hoods or darts to drop out the board. Okay, so first of all, how to use it. It's really simple to use. All you've got to do is get your Edgar TV flights that are currently available in the description down below, and you just slot it into the machine, and it's got all the fixtures and fittings on there, so make sure it's in place, give it a good squeeze, and then out it'll come with this sort of hole at the bottom of the flight. Now, this can get a little bit fiddly. What you've got to do is you've got to take your ring that you traditionally put on the end of your stem, and you've got to put it into this hole which you've just made at the bottom of your flights. Now, this can get a little bit fiddly, so if you do use this system, it's worth having these pre-made and pre-done rather than trying to do them in the match. And then you just slot them onto the end of your stem, and it'll just lock it into place, give you a good firm fix all the way around, which is what we've got here. And you can see how it's actually quite well on there, so you're not going to get that sort of popping off, but also it's really pushing together those prongs to really reduce the possibility of getting that Robin Hood and the dart coming out of the board. This is sort of one of the original things before we now start to see a lot of these all-in-one systems that we now see, where the flight and the stem are actually in one big combination together. But what are the benefits, the pros and the cons of actually doing this? Because it's something we're seeing quite a lot at the moment in darts. So the best thing to do was to have some throws of the darts with this setup, without this setup, and see what data I could gather from the two. So it's off to the board I went, and I was having a good practice and a good bit of time using the flights and the stems in the current format I use at the moment, which is without any rings at all, just a flight going into the stem. And then I was doing it with this locked system as well. And what I found as a positives and negatives are quite similar to what a lot of people are actually reporting of the positives and negatives regarding these, which on the positive side, the reduced Robin Hoods, that is where the dart sticks in the back of the other dart in terms of the stem. The flight's not popping off. A lot of people don't like to be picking their flights up all the time. You can see from this system that it's not easy to pull that off. And also, I found that the flight kept a better shape. Now, when I'm stood behind the opponent, what I tend to do is I tend to be squaring my flights off a lot. It actually helped keep the square shape of the flight. I don't know whether that's just me that experienced that, but with the ring coming up the flight very slightly, it stopped it from sort of folding in on itself. So it gave a more square outcome a lot of the time. I can imagine as well, with the reduced Robin Hoods, that actually one thing this does is reduce the amount of stems that you're going to need to buy, because you can't really damage too much into the stem because the prongs are so tightly pushed in together that actually it reduces the amount of damage on the stems. However, with the positives of it, I did notice one negative, and that was that it does make it slightly more prone to an aggressive deflection. Now, by that I mean, if the dart is in the board like so, as the second dart comes in and that impact is made here on the flight, normally if the flight is going to pop off, it doesn't have too much of an aggressive outcome. But when we was watching this in a bit of slow-mo, as it sort of comes in, it just sort of rides the flight a little bit because the flight's locked in, and with that just angles the point very slightly, because if you're hitting the flight on the back of the dart, you see here how one point's in the board, the other one's further away. It's going to do something. The impact needs to go somewhere, and that just makes the point deviate very slightly in terms of from a standard deflection. So it just makes it a little bit more aggressive when the darts collide together. Now, one way to counteract that, or one thing to look at in terms of if you are using these, is I would recommend not using a very thick flight. So a thinner flight with this system wouldn't cause the same problem. I like to use quite a thick flight, so for me, I'm going to notice a little bit more aggressive in that. But if you've got a bit more flexibility in the flight, like a thinner flight, it shouldn't be too much of a problem if you're going to use this system. So are they any good? They do exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to lock the flight onto the edge of the stem and protect the stem. That's exactly what they do. I was very impressed with them for that purpose. Personally, it's not something I'm going to incorporate into my game due to the fact that I use quite a thick flight. But let me know in the comment section below. Do you use this system? What do you think? What positives and negatives have you found from using the flight punch? Go down to the comment section below and put that in. If you are interested in getting yourself a flight punch, I will also put a link in the description to where you can get a punch, but also a lot of the rings in which you can put on as like a cheap package. So I've done a bit of price comparison, and that is also down in the description below, along with where you can get some Edgar TV flights as well if you're interested in getting any of those. But let me know what you think about these things. Hit a like if you found this video useful. I'll catch you soon for some more Edgar TV. Edgar TV.